Sean Rasted, and I'll be serving as the moderator tonight. I'm joined by two candidates who are both defined by their outstanding moral fiber and their care and service for their local communities. We have with us Mr. Mark Ellmore and Mr. Jeff Jordan. Gentlemen, it is an honor to be here with you tonight. One of you will be the Republican Party's nominee to face Don Beyer in the general election. The nomination is by convention, which is set to take place on May 30th at the Waterford at Springfield. More details are planned for release in the coming days by the 8th Congressional Committee, so keep your eyes on that. Before we begin, I'd like to thank the Fairfax Republican Party for hosting this forum, and I'd like to thank Chairman Steve Knotts for his leadership and direction for the party. We'll begin with opening statements. Each candidate will receive 3 minutes, which will be followed by a question and answer period of about 45 minutes. For the last 15 minutes of this question and answer, we will be fielding audience questions, so please be submitting those to our Facebook. Finally, we'll end with closing statements. We'll begin our opening statements with Mr. Mark Ellmore. Mr. Ellmore, when you're ready, the floor is yours.
Sure, thank you so much. Hey, I want to thank everybody for being here. I especially want to thank my Fairfax County Republican Committee family and friends and the committee at large for hosting this event. You know, having lived in the community and worked in every segment of the 8th District over the 61 years I've lived here, I can't tell you how happy I am to be here tonight. I just want to thank everybody for participating, and I look forward to bringing about the message that you know and want has to be delivered here in the 8th District to bring back balance. And I just think we're going to have a great conversation tonight, and I encourage you to submit questions. I look forward to answering them to the best of my abilities, and I look forward to talking to you shortly.
Mr. Jordan, you have the floor.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it, Sean. Thank you to the committee. Want to say hello to all the delegates and all the viewers. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for participating in what is arguably one of the most important processes that we have and one of the most important elections that we've ever faced. I'm Jeff Jordan, candidate for Congress in Virginia's 8th District. I was born in this district, son of an Army officer. Did not grow up here, have not lived here 61 years. 5th generation combat veteran. My entire family has served and fought for the last 150 years for this country. And everything that I've done as an adult has been a fight against socialism or collectivism or tyranny. It's all kind of the same flavor of the wrong end of the spectrum. So my campaign is pro-liberty. So I really, excuse me, I would really enjoy your support in my campaign. Meeting in the middle, that's not an option. Nancy Pelosi isn't going to meet us in the middle. Don Beyer isn't going to meet us in the middle. None of the Democrats are going to meet us in the middle. I'm on the right. I'm going to win. I'm going to take the hill, and that's Capitol Hill. So I hope you join me in my campaign. Hold on, it's freezing up. Hope you join me in my campaign for the 8th District congressional seat.
Thank you, Mr. Jordan. We'll start with questions now. Each candidate will receive 1 minute and 30 seconds. Our first question, as you can imagine, is related to coronavirus. The Bureau of Labor Statistics released yesterday that the unemployment rate has risen to 14.7%, with about 20.5 million lost jobs in April. That's in comparison to February, when the unemployment rate was at an all-time low of 3.5%. As Congressman for the 8th District, what will you do to quickly get Americans back to work again? And we'll start with Mr. Mark Ellmore.
Sure. Well, thank you, Sean. And I think the key is following what the administration's outlining now is just doing the right things as far as reopening the country in a practical and safe and secure manner. We wrote a fantastic letter to Governor Northam just a matter of days ago, and it was well received because we laid out a strategy, a solution process. You know, in business, we are very careful to do things where we do a deep dive into what the root cause is. So we do what's called a root cause analysis on these issues. And I just think the fundamental thing we can do as a member of Congress is to support getting us back to work in every way possible. I think that's the cure we need. And hopefully with the numbers coming up in the third quarter that they're going to be better, and then next year will be hopefully as the administration predicts. But I think as a member of the United States House of Representatives, that would be step one: safely, securely, and with a way that doesn't harm people. But we need to start promoting those initiatives, and I just don't think that in this particular case, Don Byer's on the right side of that.
Thank you, Mr. Ellmore. Mr. Jordan, you have the floor.
Thank you. So, given the current situation, again, if we're looking at the pro-liberty standpoint, there have been a lot of things at the state and federal level that have really diminished and tarnished the Constitution, trampled the Constitution in some cases. So I think what we need to do coming out of this is do something similar to the FDR Commission that looked at the after the Depression, and that is evaluate everything that worked well and everything that didn't, and be able to come up and develop a plan that everybody can buy off on, that balances safety and liberty, so that we don't end up with partisans on either side taking advantage of the situation, because all it's doing is it's hurting businesses, it's hurting livelihoods. We can't go through this again. That's the bottom line. So being able to do that evaluation afterwards, so that we can build a proper plan and make sure that liberty is defended.
Thank you, Mr. Jordan. This next question will start with you again, Mr. Jordan. It's on defense. The 8th District is home to the Pentagon, Arlington National Cemetery, and thousands of defense-related jobs. How will you fight to ensure that House Democrats do not cut defense spending here in Virginia? Mr. Jordan?
So are you talking specifically defense spending on the whole, or just here in the state?
Specifically in the 8th District, but Virginia as a whole.
Okay, so
would you like clarification? As a
because defense spending here in the district, I mean, you have a lot of defense contractors, and like you said, you had the Pentagon, but there's when I think defense spending, I'm thinking of all of the forces and all the requirements that go into fielding combat forces. So it's a pretty broad question. So I'm not quite sure how you want that.
Okay, allow me to rephrase it then. In the 8th District, there are thousands of defense jobs.
Right.
Specifically for the Pentagon, but not excluding the Pentagon, in addition to the Pentagon. How would you fight to defend those jobs, to ensure that Democrats do not seek to cut spending for, your defense constituents? Does that clarify it a bit better?
I mean, if you're just looking to defend expenditures, that's just a vote, right? The goal isn't just to spend money or save money. The goal is to spend the money properly.
Understood.
Okay, so I really think the question really doesn't hit the mark. You have to say, how are you going to spend the money efficiently and effectively for everybody, and be good stewards of the dollar, protect the jobs, but protect the taxpayer. So,
Mr. Jordan, I think your time is well exceeded 1:30. I understand your criticism of the question. I think we're going to move on to Mr. Ellmore.
Okay, that's fine.
Mr. Ellmore?
Sure. Well, I think first and foremost, I need to make sure that my constituents, which are federal workers and military personnel, I'm going to stand and I'm going to give it everything I've got to ensure that their needs and rights as workers are protected. I will absolutely fight any and every request to cut the military spending or to do anything in any way. I will not vote or support anything that takes away our constituents and those workers that work for ICE, that work for the Customs and Border Patrol. So I'm 100% behind our military staffing and the support personnel there. And I will fight to the death to make sure we take care, especially of our veterans that are back in the workforce as well.
Thank you, Mr. Ellmore. We'll move on now to transportation.
Sure.
We'll start again with Mr. Ellmore. The 8th District has some of the worst traffic congestion in the nation. A recent report found that the I-95 stretch between Fairfax County Parkway and Exit 133 averages 23 traffic jams per day. Over the past decade, it seems that traffic is only been getting worse. What specific recommendations can you make to improve the 95 and Route 1 corridors?
Sure. Well, listen, specifically, we're going to be offering up legislation, God willing, I get there. But what we're going to do, we've been supporting this initiative, since we started our campaign last fall. And that is, I want to endorse federal hoteling. Now, the coronavirus situation has kind of forced people a little bit in that direction already regarding what's called teleworking. But I've offered up a number of initiatives, and I'm working with local leadership in Stafford County, Loudoun County, and Prince William counties that would allow federal workforces from all agencies, commerce, maybe justice, maybe it's the Department of Energy, the EPA, whatever that organization or entity may be. We want to have them set up hoteling sites. So let's hypothesize and say we set up a site in Stafford, Virginia, that is a standalone facility. They maybe lease the space or build out the space, but you can have workers that take up all the space on 95 coming up from those areas. They don't live in the district. They happen to work and drive through our district. That's a big concern we have with my friends over in Arlington as well. But we absolutely want those hoteling sites as an option in Loudoun County, in Prince William County, and in Stafford County. And what that would do would get an estimated 10,000 cars off the road, because moving towards telecommuting, but the hoteling, where you might work for any agency in DC, but you can go plug and play, so to speak, at any of those locations. It's cost effective. We've been incentivize those employees, and allows people to have a better quality of life because they're going to be working where they live.
Thank you. Mr. Jordan?
So I think the number one thing we can do is realize that the transportation issue is largely a state and local issue. There is a role for federal government there, but by and large, that's a state and local issue. When you're looking at the impact that the 8th District suffers with traffic, I think the best thing to do is take a look at what we're going through now with the pandemic. The workforce is teleworking. It's exercising maximum telework. Why can't we continue to do that down the road? Maybe not to the same extent, but certainly, 60, 70, 80% on any given day could be teleworking. That would take a huge number of cars off the road right now. So the ability to do that's a quick answer. And then we really need to look long-term at our planning and say, okay, where do we want to build the second beltway? And build a second beltway now, further out, 20 miles out, 30 miles out, whatever it is, and then incorporate mass transit on that kind of loop. And then start to move some of the federal agencies and some of the workforce out to those locations.
Sean, may I add something to that just quickly?
We're only reserving the right to reply unless candidates specifically.
Oh, yeah. No, I apologize. Okay.
Yeah, no worries. We'll give opportunities at the end for closing statements.
Yeah, I just wanted to add something to the Outer Beltway.
We're going to move on to a question related to technology. So according to a recent report from the University of Maryland, there is a cyber attack every 39 seconds in the US, and it affects 1 in 3 Americans each year. Many industries are reporting skill shortages in cybersecurity. How would you address this growing threat? We'll start with Mr. Jordan.
Well, I think the first thing you need to do is, incentivize that in the education system. And I imagine we'll get to an education component question later, but really that's where it begins, is incentivizing those jobs and working with the Northern Virginia Technology Council, organizations like that, really to leverage the ability of the people that we have already and the capabilities that we have already. I don't think throwing a lot of money at the problem is the answer. I think reorganizing and maybe consolidating some of the things that we have in order to use them better is the more appropriate option. So I would go with that.
Thank you, Mr. Jordan. Mr. Elmore?
Well, I think technology is a big piece of, again, the educational process. But my big concern is again, with H-1B visa situation where we've just got countless people coming in. I just think we need to find a better way to make it so that we're providing the opportunity for our young people and the people, the college graduates we have here to participate, especially in the technology industry. Everything's going towards technology. And I think that we need to do more to encourage and incentivize our students and give them an opportunity here. I think that's a deeper issue that we really need to take a look at, is the H-1B visa issue, and to see if that's really practical in the process that it is now with that implementation.
Thank you, Mr. Elmore. We actually have a question related to immigration next. If you were to become, you both have come out in support of President Trump's border agenda. As Congressman of the 8th, how would you contribute to the protection of American sovereign soil, and what actions would you take to stem illegal immigration in this country? We'll start with Mr. Elmore.
Sure. Well, I think first and foremost, I'm happy to say, my wife is a legal immigrant. She came here from Iran. I think that right now the big issue is that southern border and making sure that we secure the border, that we do everything we can to make sure that strategy is implemented. We need to reinforce and make sure that we don't do anything that would harm our Customs and Border Patrol process, that we need to retain a viable and vibrant ICE organization there and make sure that that department's funded and protected. But I'll just also think that it comes down to making sure that we're accepting and inviting the right people here, and making sure that it is a merit-based process system, that we're bringing in the best and the brightest from around the globe. And I think that goes a long way towards helping out, as well as making sure that we do something with the visa stay process. I think that's where a large majority of the people who have overstayed their visas and that type of thing have really hindered the process. And we've got an excessive number of people who are in the country illegally at this time.
Thank you, Mr. Elmore. Mr. Jordan?
Immigration is a pillar of our national identity, but the rule of law is the foundation upon which it must stand, period. So if you're going to come to this country, you need to do it legally. If you do it illegally, you need to be deported. It's that simple. That way, we don't end up with problems like DACA and the political discourse that comes with that. We need to secure the borders, the ports. Those are just gateways. We also need to look at sanctuary cities. And the Supreme Court just this week ruled in favor of the Trump administration withholding funds from sanctuary cities. So I would like to be able to introduce legislation that holds elected officials accountable, so that if you advocate and pass laws that support sanctuary cities or that kind of activity, that you are held accountable not only for obstruction of justice, for violating the Constitution and federal law, but also that you are held as accountable as an accessory to every criminal act by every criminal alien in your jurisdiction.
Thank you, Mr. Jordan. This next question is actually related to DACA itself. We'll start with you, Mr. Jordan. What is your position on a pathway to citizenship for immigrants here illegally, especially for DACA recipients?
I think when you're speaking specifically about DACA, the cat's out of the bag. So we can't really shove it back down in the hole. They are here illegally, but they were brought here probably against their will or unknowingly at the time. I would offer that in exchange for either public service or military service, we could then find you a pathway to citizenship. If you choose not to take that option, then the only other option is to deport you, unfortunately.
Thank you, Mr. Jordan. Mr. Elmore?
I do believe that the DACA situation is one that needs to be addressed immediately. And as the president has mentioned, we have to find a solution and work together and get that done, because it's really just lingering far too long. I do believe, though, after talking to many of our constituents, people that own nurseries, people that own roofing companies, people that own landscaping companies, people that are in the trade industry, that we need to come up with, as a body, a comprehensive immigration policy that would allow for a worker visa program. And I think that's going to be one of the things we have got to address. And we've got to find a way. It doesn't necessarily lead to a pathway to citizenship, but we just got so many people working in this country already doing a great job for these particular employers. And they've all said they'd have to shut down their business. So while we don't want to give away citizenship, we don't want to make it easier for people to come here, because I think this is a great gift to become a citizen of the United States. But I do believe that we need to find some way to come up with a worker-related program that would give people the right to work here, but not be a free ride. And maybe it does provide, if we come up with the right plan, a pathway to citizenship for folks, but it's not going to be an easy ride and it's not going to be free. And I absolutely do not support amnesty in any way.
Thank you, Mr. Ellmore. This next question will transition to healthcare. For years, it has been a Republican objective to repeal the Affordable Care Act. Upon taking control of Congress and the presidency in 2017, a number of repeal and replace proposals came about in the House of Representatives. Republicans were unable to pass any of them into law. What do you believe is a viable alternative to Obamacare, and how will you work to bring a consensus around such an alternative? We'll start with Mr. Ellmore.
Yes, sir. Well, I first believe that, again, the Affordable Care Act needs to be done away with. I think that eliminating the mandate was a first step. But I think that some of the things, when we look at it and we do an analysis and we say, we need to make it so that people have access. And what I mean by that is that you make it so that we can have interstate medical corporations or insurers work across state lines and open it up with competition, drive the prices down. I also believe that, why, if it doesn't cost 1 red cent to the taxpayers, and especially during these tough times, that instead of 26 years old being the limit now, seeing that we're in a very difficult time and this could go on for a couple of years, who would it hurt to say, maybe we make that age where you can be up to 30 or 32 years old and be on your parents' plan, so long as it's not taxpayer heavy and nobody gets charged as a taxpayer. And I think there's another benefit that we can work on, and that's as taking care of this whole problem we have with the pharmaceutical industry. And I think we need preferred nation status and make it so that these pharmaceutical companies don't put the bill on our back and on the back of our taxpayers and then charge us everything and then give away the medications to other countries for pennies on the dollar. So I think those are things that we can do, that we tangible solutions that we could address as a body. And I'm looking forward to having the opportunity, because that is a critical part of what we need to address coming up in the coming year.
Thank you, Mr. Ellmore. Mr. Jordan? I agree that the ACA needs to go. It's done. It needs to die. Healthcare is a service and not a right. So you can't compel somebody to provide you a service. That's called slavery. We're not there. We don't need to go there. The government's role is to administer policies that streamline the processes and the abilities of both the industry and of those that are served to be able to buy it, get it, afford it, and be able to get everything that they need in order to stay healthy. Increase competition. We need to move our supply chain out of China. We need to move it back to Puerto Rico, where it came from. That would help the Puerto Rican economy immensely down there. And I think we should also look at doing things like accepting pre-existing conditions, penalizing prescription price gouging, mandating provider menus with listed pricing so that people know what they're buying and how much it's going to cost. That'll improve the competition model. Incorporate non-traditional and holistic treatment methods, because there are a lot of things that, Western medicine or what have you don't include but work for some people, and eliminate hidden billing.
Thank you, Mr. Jordan. We'll move on next to our next question, which will be related to energy and the environment. House Democrats seem more concerned with publicity stunts aimed at scoring political points rather than substantive solutions. Many would describe the Green New Deal as exactly that. What can you do to ensure real steps are taken to improve American energy independence, build American jobs, while also protecting the environment? Mr. Jordan?
Well, I think given the current environment, we're at risk, I think, of losing some of that independence and maybe sliding back towards maybe a neutral position because of the impact that the oil industry is having on all of the shale, all the businesses that do the shale drilling and all that out west. So I would support helping those industries out, get them back on their feet so that we can maintain our energy independence edge and move forward. I also think we need to be better stewards of our foreign aid dollars and where those go, particularly with related to countries that don't like us or swear they're going to kill us. So.
Thank you, Mr. Jordan. Mr. Ellmore?
Yeah, Sean. So our campaign over the past 8 months have been touting a new initiative. And I've always said, we don't need a Green New Deal. We need a Green New Day. And that includes doing things right here for the 8th Congressional District, working on community cleanups as an active member of Congress, participating, committing to do that, committing to work with community organizations locally for quarterly cleanups, doing all the things fundamentally that we need to do as individuals. We need to think globally and act locally, but we need to make it so we have individual accountability in the process. So I would be advocating constant activism as far as doing the work ourselves and cleaning up our area, working to promote high-speed rail, improving metro, getting cars off the road, getting pollution down through our hoteling recommendation and legislation. But more importantly, it's a lifestyle. It's not, we don't need a Green New Deal where we're going off the rails, so to speak, in a way that it's not implementable. It's not implementable now. It's not implementable in 20 years or what have you. But I believe that the free markets will do that for us. I believe that one day you're going to see there will be nothing but electric cars. And that's because that's where the market will take us. I believe that there will be homes that are high energy, or energy efficient, I should say. And those homes, but that's going to be the market. When you build or buy a home, you're going to say, hey, I want it to have these components. And those are the active action steps that we can take. But as a member of Congress, you have to be willing to roll up your sleeves and get dirty and go do the work with the folks in the community, the tree planting, that type of thing.
Thank you. All right, this next question is related to education. Congressman Don Beyer is in favor of federal education standards, including Common Core. What do you believe is the appropriate interaction between the states and the federal government when it comes to education? Mr. Ellmore?
Yes, sir. I know one thing. One Fairfax is the most unbelievable mess I have ever seen in my life. So what we don't need is that. So while we're at it, I believe it's local. I think that's one of the problems we have here in Northern Virginia is that unfortunately we have so many wonderful people. We don't have anybody on the school boards helping to make those decisions. So I believe that it's local, and I believe that education, a good, solid education, starts at home. It starts with a solid family environment. So we're going to be doing things that promote family units. We're going to be doing things that promote the K through 12 process and improving schools there. I just think that the fundamental problem, though, one starts with a family, and two is people trying to indoctrinate our children instead of educate them. So I think that we need to get away from that process and get it back to the communities. And I think those communities that have balance in the school board system, I think that those work best. And I love and admire our teachers. My sister's a school principal, a retiree, and I've had that in the family for so long, and I just have so much respect for our teachers. And I believe that, one of the things we can do is make teaching a profession instead of a sideshow. It's like we didn't really appreciate nurses as much as we do now. But I believe with this new education model that's coming out with technology, we need to have our best and brightest and encourage teaching as a profession.
Thank you, Mr. Ellmore. Mr. Jordan?
Well, I think diminishing educators at this point is disingenuous. But, we have to be educated is to be intellectually liberated or free. Once you learn something, that's something that nobody can take away from you. And we do need to teach our young minds how to think and not what to think. I'll give you an example. My second grade daughter came home and said in the midst of a conversation about Trump that, oh, Trump lies 5 times a day. And I said, excuse me? And I said, where did you hear that? She said, my teacher told me. So imagine my shock when I learned that my second grader is being indoctrinated on political topics. And it infuriates me that teachers would use their political beliefs on a second grader. So needless to say, I feel very strongly about getting that out. Real quickly, we need to give people the choice to pick their schools, go where they want to go. The federal role really should be limited to research, military schools, and the DC schools, and push everything else down to the states in terms of policy and funding, and let the states do it. That's their business.
Thank you, Mr. Jordan. This next question is related to Second Amendment. On his website, Don Beyer brags about being a champion for red flag laws, which violate the Second, Fourth, and 14th Amendments. What is your solution to gun violence in America, and how will you be a champion for the Second Amendment? We'll start with you, Mr. Jordan.
So the only gun control that I can get on board with is teaching people to use them safely. Gun control begins with trigger control, not any other way. We have the Second Amendment for a reason, and you know, if you look at the violence and the tragedies that happen, I will not diminish those. However, we are trying to solve a problem by treating a symptom, not treating the problem. So let's look at the underlying mental health issues. Let's look at how are we teaching our kids to cope and manage. You know, I've always said, if you can teach somebody how to manage time, how to manage money, and how to manage relationships, you're going to succeed in life. And if we can do those kinds of things and teach our young kids that, I think that would go a long way towards mitigating some of the challenges and problems that we have. And I also think this kind of goes back to the social engineering in the education system about, oh, you should feel good for the sake of feeling good. No, you have to earn it. You have to, that's where your self-esteem comes from. And that's the counter to the anxiety and the depression and all of the other things, all of the other negative things that people go through, particularly kids, especially at the middle and high school levels.
Thank you, Mr. Jordan. Mr. Ellmore?
Yeah, I believe that Don Beyer's completely wrong. And I'm a strong supporter of the Second Amendment, and I will fight for every ounce that we need to protect the rights of gun owners in America, and especially our citizens here in the 8th District. But I think the problem is deep. And when we do a root cause analysis, you'll see that the problem really comes down to something that I've long talked about, and that is we don't have a political problem in this country. We have a spiritual problem. And we know that people that commit these acts of violence, whether it's radical jihadists or whether it's Dylan Roof in South Carolina or anybody else, the Fort Hood shooter, these people are mentally ill, spiritually bankrupt, sick, angry people. And that's really the deeper issue. I will do nothing that's going to infringe on the rights of our families and responsible hunters and sportsmen and other gun owners, because I don't think they're the problem. I think that we need to dig deeper as a community and as a Congress and really talk about getting down to the core issues. What causes it? Because talking about gun owners and gun rights and everything else, that doesn't solve the emptiness and the problem that we have with people doing the acts. We've got to get to the root cause and solve that. And that's where we'll find some answers there. But I think Don Beyer's dead wrong. And I think that he is absolutely an antagonist. And I know when he was lieutenant governor, he didn't have these strong far left views on this. So I think we can do better.
Thank you, Mr. Elmore. This next question is related to abortion. What are your beliefs on abortion, and how will you defend the sanctity of life? We'll start with you, Mr. Elmore.
Sure. Well, obviously, I can't look at it any other way than everyone ever on this planet is created by God, for God. And I truly believe that every life is precious. Any survey, if I get anything less than a 100 on any survey you're talking about life, I would be ashamed of myself, because That is one thing that I stand for unequivocally without any question whatsoever, because if you can't stand for life, what can you stand for? The sanctity of life is one of the most important issues we have. Now, as a member of Congress, outside of voting for some ban or constitutional ban on that, which the Supreme Court has spoken, but I think we can do more in the way of prevention, and I think we can do more of preventing unwanted pregnancies. But I think we can do more with the emotional health and well-being of our young people that maybe do things irresponsibly that lead to unwanted pregnancies in many cases, because I don't think abortion is the solution to the problem. I think that we need to do more education and emotional support in that area. And I can tell you right now, nothing in this country that we're going about right now has any more impact than the fact that we have created a culture of death. And that's where we're at. Secular humanists, the life doesn't mean anything to them because they're not grounded in anything and they have no faith. And that's really where it all breaks down. So I'm 100% pro-life, period.
Thank you, Mr. Ellmore. Mr. Jordan?
So the first right in the Constitution is inalienable right to life. It doesn't get any clearer than that. Inalienable right to life. So from a policy perspective, from a government perspective, why aren't we spending more money throwing money on adoption rather than abortion? Why aren't we spending money on those communities that are highest at risk, enabling them to have the jobs and have the kind of lives that may move them out of that risky behavior? Let's do that rather than abort people. And I heard an interesting fact recently that that Planned Parenthood kills more African Americans every 2 weeks than the KKK did in its history. So imagine those numbers. That is shocking. And it doesn't matter whether they're African American or any other color. They're babies. They're humans. Stop killing them. Period. End of discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Jordan. Transitioning a bit to these audience-footed questions, how would you address the rampant development and growing density in Arlington, Alexandria? It's a question that we've visited, but more specific now to just Arlington, Alexandria. We'll start with you, Mr. Jordan.
Well, again, I think that comes back it's similar to the transportation problem. Let's plan properly. Let's fix our planning problems. We are where we are today because we planned poorly. So whether that's traffic, congestion, development in general. So let's do a better job planning and enable the community to grow in a way that is sustainable, profitable, and allows freedom of movement.
Thank you, Mr. Jordan. Mr. Ellmore?
Sure. Well, Sean, the first thing is I absolutely stand against this whole proposed notion that they want to San Franciscoize Arlington and Alexandria. And what I mean by that is that's their whole mission here in Northern Virginia, is to put high density housing. And we know, looking at some of the facts, and let's look specifically at this pandemic and in New York City and some of the problems they've had. A lot of these people who are becoming ill in high numbers come from high density locations in Brooklyn and Queens and other areas. And I just think that when people come to you and say, oh, by the way, like they are in Alexandria, we want to take away your single family home. Just look at the whole Route 1 strip now. Having lived here my entire life, I remember when Beacon Hill, when I was a little boy, they had just done away with the airport to put a giant food up there. I remember going down the Hybla Valley when it was an Atlantic Thrift and those types of things. So if you take a look at it now, high density housing is a huge, huge issue for us. And I'm going to side with the folks that say, you know what, enough is enough. Yes, we need to manage our population to the degree that, I just don't want us to become a major urban area and tie it to San Francisco, Oakland. And I think that's what they're trying to do, because high density housing means, you're putting 800-900 people in a building. And, I think that's another way that Democrats plan on building their voter base in a way.
Thank you, Mr. Ellmore. This question is related to social media. Social media platforms have been accused of shadow banning and otherwise censoring conservative voices. What do you believe the federal government's role is, if any, in ensuring conservative voices are allowed to be heard on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, etc.? Mr. Elmore?
Sure. Well, I think it's a free speech issue. And you can just take a look at whether it's the IRS, just haggling conservatives, or whether it's Yahoo or Facebook. It's there. It's real. But I think until we change the culture, until we get people that claim to be the freedom seekers and the free speechers and the anti-tyrannists, it's all a bunch of nonsense. They're the most oppressive and authoritarian people because all they want to do is stifle speech. So I think there is a way to take a look at some of the things that the federal government interacts with. Again, I don't have all the data on that to say what's Google's interaction with the federal government, what is Facebook's interaction. But I just think it's a common core situation we need to take a look at, where we're up against the wall as conservatives. We don't have a voice. And I truly believe that yes, there's something behind that, and that the federal government needs to take a look at what's going on and to figure out a way to get these companies to allow free speech, because they don't even do it for their employees. Look at Google, look at Facebook, look at Yahoo. If there's 5 people that work for all 3 of those combined, let me know. But that's the problem. And I think that's going to be the key is maybe take a look at how do we do business with these guys overall, because freedom of speech is paramount.
Thank you, Mr. Elmore. Mr. Jordan?
So I think we have to differentiate between the rights and responsibilities of government and the rights and responsibilities of industry when it comes to protection of freedom of speech. So absolutely, the government needs to be able to allow that to happen. In industry, though, if you own a business, you typically have control of what happens with that business. Now, I think there's an opportunity here, and the key really comes down to content ownership. And so if you make a video and you post it, you've created the content. The social media platform is that, a platform. It's provided the framework for you to place that content. It should be able to manage its framework as it sees fit, but it should not be able to prevent you from uploading or sharing your content that you developed, okay? And you should own that content, not the company. You should own your data, whether it's the metadata on your phone that says where you go and where you've been. Okay, you own that. You own the phone. You pay the bill. So we need to make sure that individuals own their own data and own their own content.
Thank you, Mr. Jordan. Our veterans deserve top-notch health benefits. The VA has not always been a top-notch provider. What should be done to ensure the best benefits for our veterans? We'll start with you, Mr. Jordan.
I think the first thing you can do is add incentives to the healthcare industry that treats veterans. That's first and foremost, and allow them to treat veterans. Allow the veterans to go to those facilities more freely than what they can now. I think the VA has done a lot of work in terms of trying to improve its capabilities and its image and what it does for veterans. And it certainly has done a lot, but I think it still falls short, and it could use some help. So let's get them some help. I know that there are efforts to bring medical records into, make them shareable between DoD, VA, and industry providers. So, that's enabling a lot of improvement in care and that. But really, at the end of the day, we just need to expand the ability of the veteran to get care wherever they are able to, and wherever they're able to get to, because they can't always travel a couple 100 miles to go to a hospital. It just doesn't work that way.
Thank you, Mr. Jordan. Mr. Elmore?
Yes, sir. I fully support everything President Trump has done. I think he's done an amazing job rebuilding the VA. I think that by allowing veterans to go, and when they can't get to a VA hospital, to have access to some, open regular traditional, public places to go to private hospitals. I mean, so I think that we can do more in the way of caring for our veterans that are in that situation. Again, he's done an outstanding job. I think the new VA secretary is doing a better job, but it can never be enough, because taking care of our veterans, especially our wounded and disabled veterans, listen, I don't care. That right there with life might be the number 1v1 issue, is making sure our veterans are cared for. My son served 8 years in the Air Force. My dad was a World War II veteran. My brother served in the Vietnam era. So I'm very well aware of the needs there. And I support what President Trump is doing, because I think he's on the right path. But it comes down to a core value and making sure that we love, respect, and care for our veterans with nothing else. I mean, that's the best thing we can do, is make sure legislation in every way supports, preserves, and cares for our veterans, because they are number one.
Thank you, Mr. Elmore. Government has many layers to it: federal, state, local. Give examples of appropriate issues for each to manage and what you would change. So we'll start specifically with federal, and then perhaps you can describe what you think is appropriate for state and local. Mr. Elmore?
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know that you were addressing me with that. Sure. Well, I think that when you're talking about immigration, for instance, is a federal issue that we need to make sure is in place, whether it's the Customs Border Patrol, ICE, etc. Is that did you want just a specific example of a federal issue, or what?
Federal, state, local, just general understanding of what you believe the appropriate.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, I apologize. It's a little bit convoluted, but again, at the federal level, I think that, their oversight obviously is to protect us, right? And to make sure that we're safe. And I think that on the local level, things like education and other local issues that have to do with the way our republic is set up. So I think that the states have rights. I'm a big believer in states' rights, trying my best to remain a constitutional conservative. So I take a hard lean that way when it comes to states' rights, when it comes to individual liberties and that type of thing.
Thank you, Mr. Elmore. Mr. Jordan, would you like me to reread the question to you?
Yes, please.
All right. What do you believe the appropriate interaction between the federal, the state, and local is? And can you provide examples of which issues relate to each one of those three?
Yeah, it is a pretty...
It's audience fielded question.
Okay. So I'm not quite sure I understand where they want me to go, but so at the federal level, to me, it's all about defense and homeland security, protecting the nation. At the state level, you also have state level homeland security entities that do their business within the state. It's usually tied to a fusion center that has various law enforcement from all the levels, federal, state, and sometimes local levels are involved in those. And then local level, really, it's about taking care of just infrastructure and making sure that people can get to where they need to go. So, it all has to work together, but yeah, I'm not really sure exactly where they want us to go with that question, but it's.
I think that's a more than sufficient answer. Thank you. Thank you, Mr.
Okay.
I like it.
I think we have exhausted plenty of questions here. We've asked lots of questions,
Sure,
going over a wide range of different issues and topics. So we'll go into closing statements now. Each candidate will receive 3 minutes for closing statements, and we'll do it in reverse order from how we had the opening. So, Mr. Jordan, when you're ready, you have the floor.
All right. So really, this election is not about any of these individual issues. This election is about socialism and liberty. That's the fight. That's why we're here. That's what we need to be looking at. My take is that all of these issues aren't really problems. They're symptoms of a larger problem, and that problem is socialism. Because if you take the socialists from the left out of the equation, a lot of these issues can self-correct. And the ones that don't we can actually sit down and have a conversation about it. But right now is not the time. We can't meet in the middle. The Democrats aren't going to do that. Pelosi's not going to do that. Byer's not going to do that. People are not going to meet in the middle. If you want to have a picnic on the battlefield and talk about transportation and how great it is or how bad it is, that's great. Do that. But I'm here to fight. This is a battle on the battlefield. Things are happening. Constitution's getting trampled. That's the existential threat. None of the rest of the stuff that we've talked about tonight really matters unless we address the existential threat of socialism, period. So I plan on fighting it, defending the Constitution, right to life, 2A all the way, okay? There's nothing that I can't do. There's nothing that I've never done that prevents me from taking that hill. And when I say take that hill, I mean Capitol Hill. That's where we need to take the fight. Because if you like what's going on in Virginia right now, vote blue. But if you want better, and if you want to avoid what's happening in Virginia happening at the national level, you need to vote red, period. So November 3rd, you need to vote for every Republican on the ticket. So make no mistake, liberty is at stake, and I will fight for it. I'm fighting for the Republic. I'm fighting for Virginia, and I'm fighting for you.
Thank you, Mr. Jordan. Mr. Ellmore, your closing statement?
Sure. Well, listen, again, thank you, everybody, for participating tonight. And I really think what this election is about here is we're talking about is on May 30th. It's about who's the best person to carry our flag up the hill. We know it's going to be a steep challenge. We know that the challenge is large here, but we need to have a campaign that's going to be vibrant, energetic, and is going to carry our message of faith and of family and freedom to as many people as we can. So we need to be reaching out, and our campaign is fully committed to hitting every inch of this community. We're going to go to Lyon Park. We're going to go to Boston, to Clarendon, over to Crystal City. We're going to be in Old Town Delray. We're going to get all the way over to the peak of Annandale and over to North Springfield and right down Route 1 to Hybla Valley and that whole corridor. I just think that that's really what we're talking about here tonight is who is the best person to carry our flag coming up this fall to challenge Don Byer. I believe that I've got the experience. I've lived here my entire life. I've worked or taken care of business here over 61 years living here in every inch of the community. And I'd be honored to have the privilege to say I'm your representative, your nominee to carry that forward. We've got a great campaign. I've got a great campaign team. We've got a great model. And I think that with the energy, enthusiasm, and encouraging our other Republicans in the community to roll up your sleeves and let's get ready to get to work. It is a challenge, but we're going to carry that flag up the hill as far as we can, and we're going to make you proud, and we're going to do everything you want to do and everything you want to have said on your behalf, because we don't have a voice right now. There's no balance in Northern Virginia, and that's going to be my goal, to stand for you, to represent you, and to serve you. We're going to go forward. We're going to try to outlove, outwork, and outserve the Democrats. And I think that's going to be a model to help us rebuild this party. I love where I live. I love my Republican brothers and sisters. And I guarantee you one thing, I'm going to give it 110% for you.
Thank you, Mr. Ellmore. With that concludes our debate. I'd like to just, again, thank you two gentlemen. It was an excellent debate. I thought we really understood the issues there, understood where we're coming from as the two candidates. I hope for those who are watching, you got an understanding of where the candidates are coming from. What their belief system is, and maybe you can make a decision on May 30th about who you believe your candidate should be to be the nominee against Don Byer. Last thing I'd like to say before closing is the Fairfax County Republican Committee will be hosting another debate like this one next week, next Saturday at 7 p.m. for Virginia 10th Congressional. So please keep your eye on that. And with that, I'd like to thank you all for watching this debate. Thank you to Mr. Jordan and Mr. Ellmore. And everyone have a lovely evening.
Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.